All right, folks, this is Joe Imbriano. We're going to try this again. I do apologize for being cut off in the earlier stream, but we're live now. We'll give it just a moment for the notifications to go out. This is Joe Imbriano, your host, the Fullerton Informer, on Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. And we're coming to you live from the streets of Orange County, California. And this is an updated broadcast to the earlier transmission that was abruptly cut off earlier in the day. Okay, so I'm glad I've got you back. So I did not get a chance to finish what I was talking about. This is your host, Joe Imbriano, P.O. Box 4121, Fullerton, California, 92834. On the web at thefullertoninformer.com, 5gdangers.com, vaxdangers.com, celltowerdangers.com, wifidangers.com, and on it goes, folks. The discussion today earlier was about the weather modification, okay? I was explaining earlier that back in the days, and I'm talking maybe 40 years ago, 45 years ago, I was a young child. I was definitely in tune with the weather, folks. In tune like nobody's business, okay? And I could tell. Here's the deal, folks. You know, when you're riding a Schwinn 10-speed that weighed about 60 pounds, 28 miles, 30 miles a day, you know, to the beach with a backpack and a set of fishing poles, it better have been worth your while in a second stage smog alert, folks. That was me as a young man. You know, I would ride my bike down to the pier and go fishing, and by golly, it better be worth my while if I'm gonna ride 15 miles from Garden Grove to the Balboa Pier. And then come home all the way against the wind uphill, right? After fishing for 12, 15 hours. All right, so folks, the weather used to be pretty cyclical, pretty normal. We had anomalies where we had El Nino weather patterns move through, La Nina weather patterns. They would alternate and fluctuate. I remember when we'd have these El Nino weather events, we'd have tons of rain. In the summertime, the tuna crabs would be washing up on the beach, and you know, you'd be catching yellowtail and tuna, you know, 2-3 miles off the coast. Those were normal weather patterns and normal currents. The storms used to originate in the wintertime up in the Gulf of Alaska, and they would be these cyclonic circulations that would literally move southwesterly and would have a tail associated with it that would be hundreds of miles long, and that was called a cold front, and it would sweep through and encompass, you know, an area from, you know, sometimes the low would be centered right off of like Washington, and the tail end of this cold front would stretch down to Baja California, you know, 700-800 miles, and it would pick up the subtropical moisture, which they called the Pineapple Express, back when they used to have real weather reporting, and it would incorporate that moisture into the cold front, and we'd get a lot of rain and a lot of thunderstorms and unstable weather. The mountains would get snow, and you know, it'd rain for a couple days. We'd have very low barometric pressure readings where, you know, it was clearly a low pressure event, and we'd get the rain, and then the rain would end. And the next day it would dry up, and there'd be clouds in the morning, and then there'd be a little bit of residual showers from the evaporation and recondensation. And then a northwesterly clearing wind would come through, blow it all out, right? And then we'd have, I remember riding our bikes with the leaves in the street, running around flying kites. My dad would make kites out of newspaper and bamboo and flying with fishing poles. Folks, I remember the weather, and the sky was blue, and the sky was kind of brown from the oxides of nitrogen from the car exhaust back in the day. But we didn't have these lines all over the place. The sky didn't look like a bunch of TV antenna tire track herringbone formations with lines playing tic-tac-toe up there, and all of this weird, powdery, fuzzy-looking stuff. And you didn't have static electricity every single day of your life in the winter like you do now on the West Coast. Now we have an electrified atmosphere with offshore winds, Santa Ana condition all the time. You turn on the weather, in Southern California. Oh, a Santa Ana condition is going to develop. Santa Ana conditions are offshore winds. They're associated with high pressure, folks. And what they've done, they used to, the weather would make landfall in the western United States. The storms go from west to east, folks. They come across the continental United States, landing in California, and they sweep across the country. Sometimes they'll break up into smaller ones. Sometimes they'll gain momentum depending upon what they encounter. But they would sweep across coastal California and Oregon and Washington and work their way eastward as it descended from the Gulf of Alaska. It would move southwesterly. Now what's happening is they're installing high pressure repeatedly over the southwestern United States. And what happens is these low pressure systems are still forming in the Gulf of Alaska, but they're not making landfall on the western coast of California. They're actually riding over the ridge or dome of high pressure, and they're dropping down through Idaho and Montana, and taking with it all of its energy and moisture that should have been dissipated and deposited here. And so what happens is you have these cold fronts that are being turned into Arctic Express monsters, okay? Because they're being diverted. And that is why you have these weather events, folks. And it has nothing to do with automobile exhaust or people burning coal or people burning methane or cows belching methane or people breathing out from running a mile or any type of carbon emission scam, con job, baloney, fake science nonsense that the school district has taught you. It has everything to do with intentional weather modification designed and perfected to give you the impression, based on a parallel narrative, that burning fire is bad, so they can reduce society to a peasantry existence, a highly controlled, regulated existence, to where even the very foods we eat will no longer be growable, consumable, obtainable, or ownable. I mean, have you ever noticed how they're talking about how they want everybody eating vegetables now? They're not, my mother always told us to eat our vegetables. My dad always grew lots of vegetables. There was nothing like steamed cauliflower with butter growing up. Right after we picked it, we put it in there with the butter and the salt. Oh my goodness, right? There's nothing wrong with your vegetables, folks. But, man shall not live by bread alone, right? I mean, you've got to have other things to eat besides a bunch of powdered, reconstituted Soylent Green milkshakes and wafer bars, right? I go to the store, and what I'm noticing is there's more and more powder for sale, right? And more can't believe it's, remember, we can't believe it's not butter. Now I can't believe it's not meat, right? So the climate change agenda is really one to freak you out and make you afraid of these cataclysmic weather changes and cataclysmic weather events, so that you will give up all your rights and relinquish all of your accoutrements that really are fundamental rights, which are to grow food, to cook food, to heat water, to heat your home, to have transportation, to be able to store and produce energy. All these things require combustion, folks, and they are soon to be outlawed with this carbon neutral nonsense, right? I cannot begin to go into the detail of how dangerous the schools are and how much damage they have already done. If you take a computer and enter your address in and look at the satellite image, even though that's not a satellite image, it's really taken from an airplane, but they call them satellite images. And if you look, 95% of the United States is rural open space. There is not a problem with overpopulation. There is a problem with the control of the population. There are a lot of us, And a lot of us have resources and brains and weapons, and the controllers do not like people with resources, brains, and weapons because they pose a threat. The only people that are allowed to have resources, brains, and weapons in a dictatorship are the dictators. And in a satanic society, only the ruling elite are allowed to have brains, resources, and weapons. That's why they're taking the brains away from you with the television set, the brains away from your children with the schools and the music and the video games, and the resources away from you with draconian legislation, environmental regulation, and currency devaluation. And they're taking away your weapons with all of these false flag operations and ramming laws through, freaking you out with the green screened events so they can make you defenseless and have to go along with all of this. The United States is a nation that was founded on several principles that are all being violated by the Bolshevik Marxists that are trying to turn this place into a third world cesspool, okay? That's what's happening. And the climate change agenda is a means to an end, folks. Just like the COVID-19 agenda and narrative is a means to an end. The climate change narrative and the climate change agenda is a social engineering construct designed to radically transform every aspect of your existence and my existence into one that is highly regulated and controlled, okay? They control where you live, what you build, what you burn, what you eat, what you grow, what you sell, what you buy, what you produce, how you travel, how you produce energy, because they're going to make burning fuel illegal. And the way they're going to do this is by trashing the weather and flooding places and burning places up and inducing droughts and floods and famines to freak you out enough to make you think that it's the gas stove, that it's that cow that's turning grass into ribeye, it's that jogger on the track that's breathing too much, it's that person in the nursing home that's breathing too much. The largest producer of carbon dioxide are human beings. You see, folks, back in the 80s, the music was very prophetic, and like that guy named Sting, I never liked him. There was a group called the Police. Every breath you take, I'll be watching you, right? Well, they are. They're going to be watching every breath you take, because every time you take a breath, you take in oxygen and you breathe out carbon dioxide. And according to these guys, carbon dioxide is evil. Carbon dioxide is plant food, ladies and gentlemen. The higher the carbon levels in the atmosphere go, the better the plants grow, okay? Now, what are they telling you? They're telling you that the weather is changing because of carbon emissions. Folks, 95% of the world, actually about 98% of the world's empty. There's trees growing everywhere. By the way, do you know where all the oxygen comes from on the Earth? The vast majority of oxygen produced on the Earth is produced, well, all oxygen on the Earth is produced via a process called photosynthesis, whereby the plants, by the magnificence of God's divine engineering, have created plants that utilize water and solar energy, the energy from the sun. They capture these photons, and through a marvelous system of biochemical transformation and electromagnetism involved in it as well, they actually turn dirt and water and carbon dioxide into fruit and vegetables and nuts and berries and wood and fuel and oxygen, right? That's right. In the process of all of that, folks, in this closed system that we live in, that's another lie. We live in a closed system, ladies and gentlemen. If we didn't have a roof, all of the atmospheric gases would just fly away, okay? This thing is a closed system, all right? Let's get that off the table right away. And anybody that wants to argue that point, that's a different discussion. The more carbon you put in the atmosphere, the faster the trees grow. You see, God wasn't an idiot. God's not a dummy. He set the thing up with a bunch of redundancies, a bunch of fail-safes. The world that we live in heals itself by design, just like your body does. So we don't need to heal this so-called planet We need to rid ourselves of this cancer that is taking over the world that we live in. And it's those people that think that they're entitled to have a world of their own by killing us off through lies and deception and regulations. And the climate change agenda is a very key component to how they will re-engineer society and justify the slaughter and the starvation of hundreds of millions, if not billions of people, if they can get away with this. You see, folks, they spray stuff in the sky that have reflective and conductive properties, and they beam certain frequencies at the stuff they spray all over the place that changes the charge and the temperature of the atmosphere. And by doing this, it affects the air pressure, and it can give them the ability to move air masses. Okay? It's simple pneumatics, it's simple electrochemistry, it's simple fluid dynamics, it's simple physics. And they've got it down to a science. You don't think they've been giving these foreign students with 180 IQs, these eight paid-for years of these bed and breakfast called colleges just so they can come out and find ways to solve our problems, do you? No, they're using these brilliant young people's minds to find ways to invent weapons to deceive us and to hurt us and destroy us and kill us so they can have a world of their own without us. That's what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. So what's happening if you're in the rest of the country, California's actually what's called a climate sacrifice zone, where they actually can, dry us out and modify the weather here, and makes it very pleasant to live here. Aside from the lack of humidity, the weather's been very warm and pleasant. The rest of the country pays the price because the storms that normally would deposit rain and snow here carry that excess moisture, and then it collides with Arctic air masses and subtropical air masses from the Gulf of Mexico. That's why you got the Texas freezes and all these crazy tornadoes in places. Tornadoes that go for 100 miles. Ice storms that we've never had. Record snow levels, record low temperatures, record fluctuations, record variances of high and low temperatures in different places. These are all artificially induced by electromagnetic weaponry, scalar weaponry, aimed at electromagnetically conductive compounds that are sprayed out of aircraft at very high altitude. You can see it all over the place. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory. You know what's a conspiracy theory, folks? Everything that you're taught in school. And I have to say this, excuse me, having run the gamut and went to college, I did my time, folks. K through 12 with me was a total of 13 years, and then another 5 years at the university. I had 18 years of education, and by the time I was done with that, I realized that's the last thing it was, all right? It's mind control, it's brainwashing, and it's a destruction of your critical thinking. And most people today are doing their part because they think it's the right thing to do by having paper straws at a restaurant while all the masks are ending up in the ocean strangling the sea turtles. All right, there's a massive disconnect between logic and common sense and reality now. And that's because the children's brains have been overloaded in the schools with a bunch of mindless nonsense and lies, so that truth would not be recognizable even if it slapped them in the face with a 2x4 with nails in it, with a big neon sign flashing truth on it. They wouldn't recognize it because their brains have been trained to reject things that make sense and to accept things that make no sense. That's why they're overloaded with premises and hypotheses and theoretical nonsense that don't make any sense. That builds the objective reality for them that's really a subjective misinterpretation of reality that they accept as the norm. And they're paying people six-figure salaries to fill their trash cans up with beer bottles and work half the year to do it to the children. Trust me, these people live in my neighborhood. And they like to wax their new cars and act like they're something special. Folks, we're in trouble. And if you think education is going to get us out of this mess, you're wrong, but at the same time, you're right. Because what they call education is not an education. It is a brainwashing, brain-damaging, mind control system. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to go by and look at these schools. And you tell me how they differ from an animal farm. Oh, they've got watering troughs called drinking fountains. They've got pens called playgrounds, right? They got hatcheries called classrooms, right? And they got slaughterhouses all set up in there, and that's the nurse's office with the vaccine administration and the Wi-Fi systems. Folks, you think I'm kidding? You got another thing coming if you do. I'm just letting you all know, you need to start looking at things for what they are. You know, I remember, you know, being young, I used to look forward to going to school right when I was like in kindergarten, because we had balls to play with and there were other kids there to play with. That got old really quick when they started really hammering down with the nonsense. And they made you memorize all this garbage, remember? It's all lies, folks. Everything you're being taught's a lie. That's why they're getting away with what they're getting away with, because nobody can think, and they've engineered common sense and courage out of everybody with this rote repetition, Prussian education model. And it's so highly effective. You know, have you noticed that they haven't changed the format of education for, 70 years, 80 years? It's the same curriculum, the same classes, the same clubs, the same sports, the same playground layout, the same gymnasium, the same military model for the administration at the school districts. Your superintendent's a general, right? Principal's a sergeant, right? And then you got the department chair people, those are the officers. And then you got the enlisted personnel, which are the teachers, right? So, it's a military operation, and it's designed to wage war on the brain. And so consequently, when you're driving down the road and the sky looks like a combination of tic-tac-toe and a baby powder release at 30,000 feet, and then all of a sudden it's 90 degrees, the day before was 20, and then the winds are 60 miles an hour out of a direction they're not supposed to be coming from with clouds on top of you. You don't notice that because you've been trained into your homework, and you've been trained to turn on a television, and you've been trained to look at your stock portfolio, and you've been trained to look at when your mistress is available for a rendezvous. You've not been trained in what is required to keep you alive. See, if you were paying attention, you wouldn't be lining up right now with these people in spacesuits sticking garden hoses up your nose, okay? You'd be questioning things. You'd be making preparations. They don't want you having fire, folks. They don't want you having firepower either. But they don't want you burning things. They don't want you to generate heat. They don't want you to cook your food. They don't want you to grow things. They don't want... it was a few years ago they tried to come into my yard and poison my orange trees, right? I wouldn't let them in. Telling me there's some agricultural pest, right? Well, maybe they released the darn thing, right? Folks, this is getting really out of hand, and the stupidity and the weaponization of all of the imbeciles is becoming a chronic problem, okay? And as a result of this, we're having to bear the burden of trying to wake people up and at the same time defend ourselves, and at the same time try to stop what's happening. They have a very, very thin belly, folks. Just remember what I said. And if you scratch it with the truth, they'll hemorrhage, okay? Once somebody wakes up, they never go back to sleep. If you're part of the educational system, I've got two words for you. Shame on you and repent, okay? Because it's all your fault. What you've done to the children has turned into what's been done to the adults. And if you're doubling down on the nonsense right now, you're sick in the head and you're evil. Those are facts. You cannot go along and accept what's happening now. because it's just a matter of time before this agenda turns the store shelves empty and lets you freeze to death. And that's coming. Can you imagine if they ban wood-burning fireplaces? Wood-burning stoves? Can you imagine if they banned burning wood pellets to heat your home? Can you imagine if they force you to go electric and then they shut the power off and it's 20 below with wind chill outside and your windows are broken from a windstorm or a tree? Can you imagine how vulnerable you'll be? Oh, you think this is all really sexy, getting all technological, do you? Excuse me for just a second, folks. Have to eat a little ice, you see. By the way, I'm getting to the point where it's headlight time. All right. Can you guys still hear me? All right. Yeah, I put these on because, can you guys hear me okay? Yes or no? Yeah? Well, it's the weaponized headlights and brake lights that are becoming very pronounced right now as dusk is upon us, right? And by the way, you know, they call these headlights projector beam headlights. You're not supposed to look into projector beams, ladies and gentlemen. They make you blind. All right? This is unbelievable. I mean, think about this. You know, we just sit back. We let them spray the skies, line everybody up, inject them, line everybody up, shove something into their brain cavity, and then sit everybody in a car staring at a projector beam headlight coming at you every tenth of a second, right? They've even weaponized the brake lights, for crying out loud. Have you seen how bright these things hurt? I'm sick of it. And let me tell you why I'm sick of it, folks. Because it's coming to a head. They're moving on us, all right? You know, everything's a joke now, okay? Everything's a lie and a joke. And everybody that's going along with this is a liar and a joker, okay? And the joke is on you. And those of you who have been following me for any amount of time know what I'm talking about. I guess I could stop by the school and kind of break down how it looks like a factory farm, right? Because these schools are factory farms. And they're run by a bunch of corrupt fatheads that all they care about is money because they have a price. All right? I'm in a residential neighborhood now, so I don't need this thing. School is wicked and evil, folks. The educational system is destroying your children, okay? It did not destroy my children. I wouldn't let it. You should not let the educational system destroy your children. You should take control over their education. Because if you want the government to take care of your children, they're going to finish them off. And it's going to be a very slow, methodical, and painful process for them to undergo. I don't recommend it. Why don't you understand the reason why school is free? Why don't you understand the reason why vaccines are free? Why don't you understand why tests are free? Why don't you understand why masks are free? Why don't you understand why all this stuff is free, folks? There is no such thing as a free lunch. It's always got a hook in it. You can take it from an experienced fisherman that when I put a line out in the water with 5 hooks baited with live anchovies or salted bonita or fresh cut mackerel, I will guarantee you that that fish thinks it hit the jackpot when the guy that's controlling the line and the hook has other plans for the victim. That's exactly what's going on with the government right now in all aspects of our society. And if you're going to swallow the lies, hook, line, and sinker, ladies and gentlemen, they're going to rip your guts out, okay? And that is going to be a very uncomfortable and painful experience for you. And you better come to grips with the fact that it's an inevitability until you snap out of your trance. Once you wake up, they have no power over us unless we comply, all right? And they can't force compliance. All they can do is coerce compliance, folks. That's the reality. Compliance is voluntary. Do you understand, ladies and gentlemen? This compliance is voluntary. Everything they're doing is voluntary. Look up the word mandate, understand the language, understand all of these things. There are ways out of everything. All right, folks. I just wanted to finish this broadcast by exposing the weather warfare that's upon the United States. If you're in the Northeast or even on the East Coast, you better get ready to have days or weeks without power, without food, without heating, because they're going to do it to you. Because climate change is all about freaking you out to get you to give up the way you've been used to living and getting us all back on the plantation, folks. That is their agenda. Their plan is to get us all back on the plantation and eventually kill us all off, to get us either to kill each other or to starve us to death or to poison us, to get rid of everybody so they can have a world of their own, because they're so afraid of us finding out what they're doing to us that they're afraid we're going to wake up and take everything back. And that's why they're running out of time, and that's why it's so important that you're aware of what's going on, folks. All right? This is Joe Imbriano, the Fullerton Informer. I'm going to cut this broadcast. I want to thank you all for tuning in. And it's in Jesus' name we go. And by the way, I might as well say this. All these crooked churches that say Jesus is coming back next week, then can you do me a favor? Can you go ask them for all your money back, please? Thank you. Take care.